The stormy waves crashed violently against the rocky shores, their rhythmic roar echoing through the dense fog that clung to the beach like a shroud. Jack had been searching for answers for weeks, his quest taking him to the farthest corners of the world. But nothing could have prepared him for the discovery he was about to make, an encounter with a creature so wild, yet so mysterious, that it would change everything he thought he knew. As the fog began to lift, his eyes locked onto something unusual on the shore, a lioness, stranded and alone. Bella. A creature of the wild, yet somehow trapped in a world she didn't belong to. This was no ordinary animal, and this was no ordinary rescue. The adventure Jack was about to embark on would uncover secrets darker than he ever imagined, and a bond between man and beast that would be tested by the harshest of forces. As the storm clouds gathered ominously overhead, Jack found himself standing alone at the edge of the beach, his face pressed against the bracing winds. The air was thick with salt, and the sound of the waves crashing violently against the rocks seemed to echo the turmoil within him. His mind raced, his pulse quickening with a mix of excitement and dread. He had been tracking rumors for days, cryptic whispers about a wild animal that had been spotted near the shore. Something told him that the storm might be his final chance to find it. The beach was eerily silent, no signs of life save for the gulls circling above. Jack's boots crunched against the wet sand, the only sound breaking the heavy stillness. He had nearly given up when a flicker of movement caught his eye. Squinting against the mist that clung to the coastline, he saw a shadowy figure ahead, barely discernible through the fog. His heart lurched in his chest, and without thinking, he moved toward it. As he drew closer, the figure began to take shape, revealing the unmistakable form of a lioness. Her golden fur glistened in the weak light that fought to break through the stormy sky. She was sitting in the sand, her body trembling as if she had been through something unimaginable. Her wide eyes met his, filled with a strange mix of fear, exhaustion, and something else, something that Jack couldn't quite place, but felt deeply in his gut. For a moment, Jack stood frozen, unsure of what to do. The lioness didn't make a sound, but there was an undeniable sense of connection in that brief exchange. Her gaze seemed to say everything. She was lost, confused, and in need of help. He took a tentative step forward, his heart racing as his mind scrambled for a plan. He knew the risks. He knew the danger of approaching a wild animal, especially one as powerful as a lioness. But something in him, some instinct, told him this wasn't just any animal. This was a creature in desperate need, and perhaps, just perhaps, their paths had crossed for a reason. With every step he took, Jack's mind battled between caution and compassion. The storm raged on, but all he could hear was the pounding of his own heart. He spoke gently, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "It's okay," he murmured, more to himself than to her. "I won't hurt you." The lioness blinked slowly, her body stiffening at his words. But slowly, as if sensing his sincerity, she let out a soft growl, not in aggression, but in a low, resigned tone. Jack could feel her vulnerability, and it stirred something inside him, something he hadn't felt in a long time. It was a sense of purpose, a drive to protect and to understand. Without another word, Jack crouched down, lowering his body to the ground in an attempt to show that he meant no harm. The moments stretched on intense silence as the lioness continued to watch him, her golden eyes never leaving his. Slowly, cautiously, she inched closer. Jack's breath caught in his throat as she came within arm's reach, her warm scent mixing with the brine of the sea. Then, as the wind howled and the storm reached its peak, something shifted between them, a quiet, unspoken understanding. This was only the beginning of something far greater than either of them could have imagined. Jack reached out his hand, not as a threat, but as an offering. And in that moment, the lioness reached back. Jack stood frozen on the beach, his breath coming in short, shallow gasps, his heart thudding so loudly he could almost hear it over the crashing waves. His hand, now hovering just inches from the lioness, trembled with anticipation and a deep, unspoken fear. The storm had subsided, but the air around him still hummed with tension, an electric charge that seemed to make every movement feel heavier than it was. His fingers twitched, almost instinctively, yet he knew this moment would define everything to come. One wrong move, one sudden shift, and everything could shatter. But in that instant, it felt as though the world had narrowed down to just him and the lioness, and nothing else mattered. The lioness, so close now that Jack could feel the heat radiating off her body, gazed back at him with eyes that held an unsettling mix of wariness and curiosity. Her golden eyes, once sharp and fierce, now looked almost tired, haunted by the trauma she had endured. Her body, slender yet powerful, trembled with exhaustion, but there was a defiance in her posture, an undeniable strength that was unmistakable. She was not just any wild animal, she was a survivor, just like him. And for reasons he couldn't explain, Jack felt an overwhelming urge to protect her, to stand by her side in this strange, quiet bond that had somehow formed between them in the span of just a few minutes. His mind raced with questions. Why was she here? What had she been through? But as the wind shifted, he pushed those thoughts aside. They could wait. This moment, the one where he could feel her presence, her vulnerability, her raw energy, was the only thing that mattered now. Jack's eyes flickered down to his hand. It hovered, trembling ever so slightly, as he fought the impulse to pull away. He had heard countless stories about people trying to tame wild animals, but he knew this was different. This wasn't about taming or conquering. This was about connection. About understanding the unspoken language between them. With a slow, deliberate motion, Jack opened his palm, his fingers spread just enough to show that he meant no harm. His voice, when it finally escaped his lips, was a soft murmur, almost more to calm himself than the lioness. "It's okay. I won't hurt you." His words felt inadequate, almost foolish in the face of such raw, untamed beauty. But it was the only thing he could think to say. For what felt like an eternity, the lioness held his gaze, her chest rising and falling with each labored breath. Her nostrils flared as she drew in his scent, her eyes narrowing slightly, still unsure. And then, as if the world had paused, she slowly, cautiously, moved closer. Jack didn't dare move an inch. His entire body was taut, like a bowstring pulled to its limit, but his heart was pounding with something else now, something that was both terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. The lioness, ever so gently, reached out with her snout. Jack's breath caught in his throat as she brushed against his fingers, her fur soft and warm, but her body still tense under the touch. He didn't pull away. He couldn't. The moment her fur touched his skin, something shifted inside him, a sense of awe mixed with an overwhelming need to protect, to shield this fragile being from whatever pain she had endured. For a moment, he forgot where he was. He forgot about the storm, about the cliffs, about everything that had led him here. All that existed was the lioness, and the quiet bond forming between them. Jack's hand moved, slowly, carefully, and he began to stroke her fur. It was a tentative touch, as if he were afraid she might recoil, but she didn't. Instead, she leaned into his touch, her body relaxing just slightly. It was a small victory, but to Jack, it meant everything. She was letting him in. She was allowing him to be part of her world, even for just a moment. As the storm's fury faded into the distance, Jack felt something else, the weight of the world outside them, the weight of everything he had been running from, seemed to slip away. There was something sacred about this moment, something that transcended the chaos he had experienced before. He felt like he was standing at the edge of something new, something life-changing, and in this quiet exchange, he realized that he had found something far more profound than he ever expected. Not just the lioness, but the raw, unspoken understanding between them. She pulled away slightly, her eyes darting toward the cliffs behind them, a slight twitch of her ears betraying a sense of alertness. Jack's instincts kicked in, and without thinking, he stepped closer, his hand still reaching out for her. She glanced back at him, her eyes filled with an unspoken plea, and in that instant, Jack understood. Something was coming. Something was about to happen. The tension returned, sharp and sudden, as the lioness stood, her body still weak but determined. Jack stood too, his feet sinking into the wet sand as he moved closer. He didn't know what to expect, but he knew one thing for sure: he wasn't going anywhere. Not now. Not ever. Whatever lay ahead, whatever danger or uncertainty came their way, they would face it together. As the lioness turned, leading him toward the cliffs, Jack followed without hesitation. Whatever her past had been, whatever had brought her to this beach, he was determined to protect her, to help her heal, just as she had unknowingly helped him heal. As they moved, Jack's thoughts began to drift. He didn't have answers, not yet. But the one thing he was certain of was this: in this moment, they were no longer just two individuals, he and the lioness were connected by something far greater than chance. It was a bond of survival, of shared strength, of unspoken trust. And that bond, fragile as it may have been, was something Jack knew he would fight for with every ounce of his being. As they moved further along the beach, the wind picked up again, howling as if to warn them both of the dangers that might lie ahead. The lioness, though weaker than before, moved with an eerie grace, her paws barely making a sound on the wet sand. Jack followed closely behind, every step a silent promise to stay with her. The world around them seemed to grow quieter with each passing moment, the rhythmic crashing of the waves now muted in his ears as his focus narrowed to the lioness ahead of him. Her movements were deliberate, cautious, as if she too knew they were walking toward something unknown. Jack felt his heart beat a little faster, a cold knot forming in the pit of his stomach. He didn't know what was out there, what dangers might be waiting beyond the cliffs or the dense fog that had begun to creep in from the horizon, but he knew they had to keep moving. He couldn't let her face whatever it was alone. They reached the base of the cliffs, where jagged rocks rose up from the sand, their dark surfaces slick with the remnants of the storm. The lioness hesitated for a moment, looking up at the towering rocks before her. Jack, sensing her uncertainty, stepped forward, his voice steady despite the unease in his chest. "We're almost there, just a little further," he whispered, as much to himself as to her. The lioness glanced back at him, her eyes locking onto his for a brief moment, almost as if searching for reassurance. Jack nodded, his hand instinctively reaching out to her, though he kept a safe distance, respecting her space. She moved again, more slowly now, her breathing shallow but steady. They began to climb the rocky path that wound its way up the cliffside, Jack trailing behind her, his steps carefully placed on the slick stones. He could feel the sharp, biting wind on his face, the salty air stinging his skin, but his mind was far from the chill of the atmosphere. All he could think about was what lay ahead. Was she leading him to safety, or was she walking toward something that would bring them both danger? The lioness paused at a narrow opening between two large rocks, her body tense as she crouched low to the ground. Jack, sensing that she had stopped for a reason, stepped closer, his breath catching in his throat. She didn't move, her gaze fixed on something beyond the rocks. His instincts screamed at him to be cautious, but there was something in her posture, a sense of urgency, that made him push forward. "Is it safe?" he asked quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. He didn't expect an answer. He wasn't sure if he even needed one. But the question hung in the air, unanswered, as the lioness slowly, deliberately, turned her head toward him, her golden eyes narrowing with what seemed like understanding. Jack's heart skipped a beat. There was something in her expression that told him they weren't alone. Before he could react, a low growl rumbled in the distance. It was barely audible, but Jack could hear it, a sound that sent a chill down his spine. His pulse quickened, the blood rushing to his ears as he strained to listen. The growl came again, louder this time, followed by the sound of footsteps, heavy, purposeful, and unmistakable. Something was coming. The lioness tensed, her body rigid with alertness. She turned her head sharply, her eyes scanning the area around them, searching for the source of the noise. Jack felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. He didn't know who or what was approaching, but the growls and the heavy footfalls were growing closer, and his heart raced faster. Without thinking, Jack grabbed the nearest rock, his fingers gripping the cold stone as he prepared himself for whatever was to come. The lioness, sensing his unease, turned back to him one last time before darting toward the opening in the rocks, her movements swift and fluid. Jack hesitated for a split second, then followed her. They reached the narrow gap between the rocks, and the lioness squeezed through, disappearing into the shadows beyond. Jack was right behind her, sliding through the tight space with just enough room to move. As he emerged on the other side, he found himself in a small, concealed area, a cave-like structure hidden from view. The lioness was already inside, her body low to the ground as she watched him with a sense of urgency in her eyes. The sounds of the growls were closer now. Jack's breath caught in his throat as he realized just how close they were to being discovered. He had no idea who or what was coming, but he knew they couldn't stay here for long. His heart pounded in his chest, his hands shaking as he crouched beside the lioness, his eyes darting back to the opening, waiting for whatever was about to happen. The growls echoed once more, louder and more menacing than ever. Jack's grip tightened on the rock beside him. Whatever was coming, it wasn't going to be easy to face. The growls grew louder, reverberating through the narrow passage and causing the walls of the cave-like structure to feel as though they were closing in. Jack's mind raced as he crouched low beside the lioness, trying to steady his breathing, trying to think of a plan. His eyes darted around the small, shadowy space, searching for anything that could help them. The lioness, her body trembling slightly from the tension, was watching the entrance with a fierce intensity. Jack felt his pulse pounding in his throat. He didn't know how much time they had left before whatever was coming would arrive, but it couldn't be much. He leaned closer to the lioness, whispering into the silence, "We need to move. We can't stay here." She turned her head toward him for a moment, her eyes full of understanding and something else, fear. It was the first time Jack had seen it in her eyes. Despite her strength and pride, she was afraid too. Jack couldn't blame her. Whoever, or whatever, was approaching had the same terrifying presence he could feel in the air. Then, he heard it again, the thud of heavy footsteps, the unmistakable sound of something, or someone, approaching with purpose. There was no mistaking it now. The thing they were hiding from was close, dangerously close. Jack's mind whirled, running through every possible scenario. They couldn't outrun it, not in their current position, and they couldn't fight it either. His eyes scanned the walls of the cavern, desperate for a way out, but the only exit was the narrow passageway they'd come through. And now that it was blocked by whatever was coming, they were trapped. Suddenly, a low snarl echoed from the distance, followed by the unmistakable sound of claws scraping against the rocky ground. Jack's heart raced, a cold sweat breaking out across his forehead. It was too late to run. He looked at the lioness. She was already positioning herself between Jack and the entrance, her body tense, muscles coiled and ready for action. Her growl was quiet but menacing, a warning that whatever was on the other side wouldn't find an easy victim. Jack, despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins, realized that there was no escaping this. If they wanted to survive, They would have to face whatever was out there head-on. His eyes shifted back to the narrow gap in the rocks. There was no way out now. The sounds of footsteps stopped just outside. Jack could feel the presence before he even saw it, something massive, looming, and dangerous. He slowly moved closer to the lioness, his breath shallow as he braced himself for whatever came next. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him, his body frozen as if it knew the danger they were in. For a long moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Silence, thick and suffocating, enveloped them. Jack could only hear his heartbeat in his ears, the sound louder than the growls or the crashing waves from beyond the rocks. Then, with an explosive force, the creature on the other side of the narrow opening made its presence known. A massive, dark figure emerged from the shadows, its hulking form silhouetted against the faint light. Jack's eyes widened in horror. The creature was a monstrous bear, its fur matted and dirty, eyes glowing with a primal hunger. Its massive claws scraped against the stone, the sound harsh and terrifying. It let out a low, guttural growl that rattled the walls of the cave and sent a chill down Jack's spine. The lioness bristled, her body low to the ground, her muscles taut, ready to spring into action. Jack could see her resolve in the way she held her stance. She wasn't backing down. He admired her strength, but he also knew that a bear was no easy adversary. His hand instinctively reached for a rock, his fingers closing around the jagged stone, but he knew it wouldn't be enough. This wasn't something he could fight with his bare hands. The bear's snarl echoed through the small space as it stepped closer, its eyes fixed on the lioness. Jack's mind raced. He couldn't let the lioness fight alone. He had to do something, anything. With a deep breath, Jack stood tall, stepping in front of the lioness, his body trembling with fear but driven by something stronger, a desire to protect, to survive. He raised the rock in his hand, his grip tight, and shouted, trying to appear more intimidating than he felt. "Stay back." The bear paused, its glowing eyes narrowing, studying Jack for a moment. Then, it charged. Everything happened in a blur of movement. Jack swung the rock in desperation, but the bear was too fast, too powerful. It batted the stone from his hand with a swipe of its massive paw, sending him crashing to the ground. Pain shot through Jack's side, but he barely registered it as he scrambled to his feet. The lioness was already in motion, her powerful legs launching her toward the bear. She collided with the creature with a force that shook the earth beneath them, claws raking at its thick fur. The bear roared in pain, its claws slashing in retaliation, but the lioness was relentless. She moved with precision, her body like a blur of golden fur as she darted in and out of the bear's reach, aiming for its vulnerable spots. Jack's breath caught in his throat as he watched the brutal struggle unfold before him. The lioness was holding her ground, but the bear was massive, and the battle was far from over. Jack knew they needed to end this quickly. He grabbed another rock, this time larger, with both hands, and hurled it toward the bear's head. It struck with a sickening thud, momentarily distracting the creature. That was enough. The lioness seized the opportunity, launching herself at the bear's throat. Her teeth sank into its flesh with a vicious growl, and the bear let out one final roar of agony before collapsing to the ground, its massive body still. For a moment, there was silence. The lioness panted, her body heaving with exertion, her golden eyes locked onto Jack's as if ensuring he was still there. Jack stood frozen, watching her, the adrenaline slowly ebbing from his system. He couldn't believe they had survived. The bear was motionless at their feet, and the threat was over. But the danger wasn't gone. The lioness looked up at Jack again, as if telling him that there were more challenges ahead, more battles to fight. But for now, they had won. And in that moment, Jack realized that, for better or worse, he and the lioness were bound together by the ordeal they had just survived. And they were not alone anymore. Jack stood there, his breath still heavy in his chest as he looked at the lifeless form of the bear. The adrenaline rush began to wear off, leaving him feeling strangely hollow, as though the intense moments of fear and survival had drained him completely. The lioness, her golden coat now streaked with dirt and blood, remained poised beside him. Her deep, intelligent eyes never left him, watching him with a quiet understanding that Jack couldn't fully grasp, but felt deep within his bones. He could feel the weight of everything that had just happened, the fight, the escape, the raw terror, but there was something else now, something unexpected, a deep bond that was slowly forming between him and this incredible creature. He wasn't sure why, but the lioness seemed to be more than just an animal to him. In that brief, fleeting moment of danger, she had become something else, a partner, a protector, someone who had fought beside him in the face of certain death. "Are you okay?" Jack whispered, more to himself than to her. He wasn't sure if she understood, but her gaze softened slightly as she took a step closer to him, her movements slow and deliberate, as if to reassure him that she wasn't going anywhere. Jack exhaled slowly, wiping his hand across his forehead, wiping away the sweat and dirt that had accumulated during the struggle. He glanced at the bear one more time, making sure it was truly gone. He wasn't taking any chances. The last thing he wanted was to be caught off guard. His thoughts were interrupted by a sudden noise from behind them. The distant sound of footsteps, heavy, measured, purposeful. Jack's heart stopped for a moment. His instincts screamed at him to move, to hide, to run. But the lioness stood firm, her posture unwavering, sensing the danger even before Jack had fully processed it. There was no time to think, no time to make a decision. They were being tracked. Jack's mind raced. The bear's death had likely attracted attention. There was no way something that large could go unnoticed, not in a place like this. He glanced at the lioness, their eyes locking for a split second as if they were silently communicating. She knew what needed to be done. They both did. Without another word, Jack turned and began to move, leading the way through the winding cave, the narrow passageways he had discovered earlier. The lioness followed closely, her steps quiet but sure, moving like a shadow through the darkness. They had to find an exit, and fast. As they navigated the twisting corridors, Jack's mind raced, trying to piece together what he had just learned. Who else was out here? Who was tracking them? The footprints had to belong to someone, or something, that was still hunting them. It was only a matter of time before whatever it was caught up to them. The walls of the cave seemed to close in around them, and Jack's panic began to rise again, but he forced himself to stay calm. He needed to think clearly. His eyes scanned every crevice, every corner, searching for an escape route, a sign, anything. And then, at the far end of the cave, he spotted a sliver of light breaking through the darkness. Hope flickered in his chest. "Over there," Jack muttered, almost too quietly for the lioness to hear. But she did, of course. She was always listening, always aware. Her eyes flashed with the same determination that Jack felt. Together, they would make it out of here. They pushed forward, their pace quickening as they neared the exit. The light grew brighter, the promise of freedom drawing closer. But as they neared the opening, Jack's heart sank. Figures, human figures, stood silhouetted against the light, blocking their path. Jack's breath caught in his throat. His mind raced for a way out, but the exit was blocked. The figures ahead of them were closing in. Whoever they were, they knew exactly where Jack and the lioness were heading. Jack's eyes narrowed. The lioness stepped in front of him, her body tense, ready for whatever might come next. The situation had gone from bad to worse, and now, they were facing the unknown. Every instinct told him to run, but he knew there was nowhere left to hide. His back was against the wall. The figures approached, their footsteps heavy, almost predatory. Jack swallowed hard, trying to steady his nerves. The lioness growled low in her throat, her stance unwavering, every muscle in her body coiled and ready to strike. For a moment, everything seemed to stop, time itself seemed to hang in the balance, as if the world was holding its breath. And then, one of the figures stepped forward. "We know what you're doing here," a voice rasped from the darkness. It was a man's voice, rough and cold, laced with an unmistakable threat. Jack's eyes widened. The tension in the air thickened, and the lioness growled even louder, a warning. Jack's fingers flexed in his sides, but he knew he was out of options. He had to face whatever came next. He took a deep breath, bracing himself for the confrontation ahead. He wasn't alone anymore. And he wasn't about to let anyone, or anything, take that away from him. The winds calmed, and the storm passed, but the journey for Jack and Bella was far from over. What started as a simple rescue had spiraled into a battle against unknown forces, testing their strength, their loyalty, and their will to survive. With the shadows of betrayal lingering and secrets still unraveling, Jack knew the road ahead would be even more treacherous. But one thing was certain, the bond forged between them could not be broken. As they disappeared into the horizon, the unknowns of the world beckoned, an adventure still unfolding, with dangers lurking just beyond the next wave.